So I'm really excited to share a little bit about my my journey with you all, and a little bit about the science I do and why I do it, and who I'm doing my science with. So I don't know if any of you did some homework and looked up who Thomas Kempis is, but I'm going to share a little bit about him with you all now. So I love reading, and sometimes I'm reading the latest research paper. Sometimes I'm reading a book on becoming more organized, and sometimes I'm reading much older text. And one of these texts is The Imitation of Christ. It was written in the 15th century, and the writer, the author asks, why do we trouble ourselves with theories about genera and species? And as I read this, I was busy with my PhD at the time. And if you've done a PhD or any type of research, to be honest, you have these questions that arise to why are you doing what you're doing? And so this has really been a question that I've been able to explore. And one of my responses to why I trouble myself with theories about genera and species is that knowledge matters most when it serves people and a purpose. And to give you some context, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of the Free State in the Plant Sciences Department. And I was formally appointed in 2021. I finished my PhD in 2020, but more on that just now. I give class to a group of second years, first years. So some of the classes only have maybe 50 students and others 300. So I have a wide variety of teaching that I'm responsible for. I'm coordinated research group within a plant pathology division and field pathology. And I've been really blessed to do a lot of field work and work with farmers and attend many great meetings and meet some fantastic researchers, Laura included. And to be honest, I actually can't pinpoint the moment that Laura and I really started working together. It feels like Laura and her expertise has kind of always been part of our research team. So who are plant pathologists? So plant pathology is an extremely broad discipline. It is not just one kind of scientist. It can be someone that specifically studied plant pathology, while others may have had an agronomy or a microbiology, genetics, social sciences background. But the heart of plant pathology is about understanding plant diseases and finding ways to prevent or manage them. And this can be at a lab level, it cannot be at a field level, it can be an extension level. So plant pathologists really work towards identifying problems and finding solutions and putting that into practice. It also really, for me, keeps me deeply connected to bigger issues. Connecting crops or protecting crops also means, looking at how we can protect people and their livelihoods. So as you think about the spectrum, think about where you fit in with the plant health role. There are so many different parts of plant health that are important here. And so I always knew I wanted to do my PhD. I studied at the University of the Free State, and I had an excellent supervisor, Professor Neil McLaren. And originally, I was working on a PhD, which I registered for in 2016, that was titled The Role of Disease Modeling in the Timing of Intervention Thresholds for Selected Diseases of Maize, Sorghum, Soybean, and Sunflower. I think back then I should have already known that maybe I was taking on too much. But just like Alice in Wonderland, pursuing a PhD, I really wanted to kind of escape the dullness of these imageless books and be like Alice, where she took on her own imagination. And she tumbled down this rabbit hole, and she never once considered how she was going to get back out again. I can completely relate to this. I stepped into my PhD with curiosity and excitement, but soon found myself in a world that felt unfamiliar and sometimes very isolating. And I actually started asking myself, who in the world am I? That is a great puzzle, as Lewis Carroll said. So answering this question meant that I really needed to confront why I was doing the research I was doing, especially on such a broad scope. And I also had to consider why it wasn't working. So it took a lot of vulnerability and courage to have a conversation with my supervisor on this. So as I travel internationally, I collect teacups. And one of my favorite teacups from Norway broke. It broke into so many pieces that I really thought, oh, this thing will never be usable again. And this is kind of where the main story of today comes in. It really is about noticing that, yes, there may be a problem, but you don't have to fix it on your own. And sometimes the outcome looks a little bit different than we expected. So I want to share with you the power of 12 minutes. I had a 12-minute conversation with Professor Emerson Del Ponte, and this all comes from attending a meeting in America, an international plant pathology meeting, and reaching out to him. And I'd never met him before. I'd read some of his papers, and my friend Madeleine told me, Lisa, you need to reach out to Emerson and just hear how he can maybe help you. He's excellent and in what he does, and he's really willing to work with young people and help them, figure out what to do with their data. And if you know Emerson Del Ponte, he is a Brazilian professor that works at the University, a Federal University of Viçosa. And I sat down, he's like, I'm really sorry, I only have 12 minutes to talk to you because I need to head off on my flight. And I was like, I can respect this 12 minutes, but I was also really honest in those 12 minutes. And I said to him, I really don't know what I'm doing with all of my data. I have a huge amount of data. It's just not coming together. It's been 2 years that I've been working on the PhD. And this was actually towards the end of 2018. And he was like, don't worry about it. Come and visit me. We'll sort it all out. And this is just something that I can say is like, be vulnerable enough to ask for help. Be bold enough to follow through and accept the offer. Lean into being uncomfortable, ask the expert, reach out, and be part of something. So I immersed myself in a completely new country in 2019. Ended up finding the funding through the NRF. And I spent 2 months there learning how to use R, the statistical program, and I had to start an entire new PhD project from scratch. And I needed to finish it in 2020. So the challenge was there, and I really didn't know how I would do it, but I knew that it was possible because of Emerson's eagerness to help and to guide me. And so that 2 months that I was in Brazil, I was kind of in a plant pathology bubble. Not only that, but a powder Kaiser bubble. And if you've ever eaten these, they can give you energy for days. I learned a really valuable skill. I met some really important people that I still am connected with. And it made me shift the way I think about research and approach problems. And I think this is probably the most important thing that I've learned since my PhD. So thinking differently about problems first means taking a step back. So I had over 1,600 data points from 10 years of data to organize. And the whole idea behind this organizing was to see whether or not we could predict disease events. And well, from all of the data that I had, the data had different labels. There was definitely some outliers. It didn't make much sense. And I needed to sort it out. And I really wasn't aware how I would be able to do this. But knowing that I was in a space where I could learn and have that feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, but still take the chance on trying it, I learned how to see data differently. And while I was there, I had to create meaning out of all of this data. And while we may never have been able to predict disease events from the data, all those skills and all the different statistical approaches we attempted helped me to see that nothing is ever wasted, that you learn something every time, that even if you don't apply it, it's still something that is learned. We could see different patterns of disease, is what you're seeing at the moment, where the larger points that are popping up are bigger epidemics of Sclerotinia, and smaller points are smaller epidemics. And we can see over the years, this is really a sporadic occurrence. And this disease in soybean and sunflower is still a problem today. A little bit more on that later. So, well, after arriving back from Brazil, COVID struck. I hope this doesn't give anyone too many traumatic flashbacks, but this is a photo I found on my cell phone that we would have nationwide lockdown. And I had to finish my PhD while in COVID. And I returned. I was lecturing on contract for the university, so everything now needed to become a online learning materials, which was an interesting experience, but possible. So during this time, I had to write up, make notes, learn about version control, have online meetings with Prof. Emerson about how I was going to go forward with the new skills that I developed and what approaches we wanted to take to finalize my PhD. And well, I don't know if you can remember this cup, but finishing my PhD was like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where you put all the broken fragments together with gold. I didn't have any gold, but there was super glue involved. And it's something that came out a lot different than I expected, but still provided me with something that resembled a teacup or a PhD. And knowing that submitting my PhD is possible, in 2020, in August of 2020, I submitted my PhD. And I was so grateful for this opportunity to kind of follow through on a challenge. And I really must say, having support from friends and colleagues is what really makes this worthwhile. So something that kind of helped me throughout COVID and continuing into my appointment in 2020 was staying connected with Emerson even after my PhD. And not only to Emerson, but the mission and the vision that he had. And that was reproducible research, making science open, having transparency and reproducibility, showing others how we can build together an engaged and diverse community where we can share knowledge, support one another. And through the Open Plant Pathology Network, I interviewed some of the most incredible researchers and got exposure to experts that I never thought was a possibility. So with COVID, yes, came a lockdown and an array of online presentations, seminars, and interviews. But it really also came with many opportunities for me to learn from excellent researchers. And so not only that, those 12 minutes that I spent with Emerson at the conference led me to the privilege of being able to spend time with him. In South Africa, I could invite him to come and spend time with us in our research group for 2 weeks during a conference as a keynote speaker. He then invited me to attend the International Epidemiology Workshop in Brazil. And this really opened up a world of why am I doing plant pathology? Because I had a conversation with one of my colleagues there that asked, why am I doing what I'm doing? Do I find joy in it? And how do I see myself continuing being connected to this? And later that year, at the same meeting in Brazil, I had the opportunity to reconnect with a friend and a colleague who lives in the US and works on sorghum. And they invited me to visit them in the US. And so from this 12 minutes just completely unraveled into many smaller moments in my life that have been able to connect me to people that have made meaningful differences in the way I see the way I do work. So let's talk a little bit about Sclerotinia and this R world that I was thrown into. So Sclerotinia is a fungal pathogen that affects hundreds of host crops, sunflower, soybean, canola, And it is a massive issue in South African agriculture, probably one of the largest yield limiting factors associated with oilseed crops. And my friend and colleague, Madlies, was doing her master's at the time of me finishing my PhD, and she continued on with her PhD, and I was privileged enough also to be her supervisor during this period. And using R, we can answer questions that previously we would not have been able to. We conducted a systematic literature review. So we completely turned literature reviews on their heads, how I was used to it. And we could look at asking questions like, which active ingredients or fungicides are being researched and why are they being researched? And if they were to go off the market, what impact would this have for us, as crop protection agents? We also managed to evaluate all the different soybean cultivars that are planted in South Africa for their tolerance to sclerotinia, and inform producer choices in what kind of cultivars they would select. This was kind of the start of something called the Sclerotinia Research Network, and I'm only one part of a bigger picture. And this is a community of practice, but our sclerotinia research has really been the focus of 4 research projects across provinces, spanning looking at seed treatments and seed-borne diseases, evaluating the cultivars, looking at how do we evaluate sunflower head rot, and what tools can we use to make this more efficient for us, not only as researchers, but also to make decisions in the field on whether we need to implement specific management practices or not. Some of the projects have included engineers and remote sensing experts. And I think this is where thinking about our research and working with others is so important, because it's one thing to have an idea in your mind, just like that cup. I had this perfect cup, but it broke, and I had to figure out how to put it back together. And I think recognizing that early in my career made me note how wonderful it is to rather work with people and work in teams. And these are actually the experts, not myself. So one of the other things that came out of this 12 minutes was even starting a website, which I must admit is currently offline because of a server issue. So please don't go and look at it. But we've even taken a platform to have hundreds of photos of plant rust diseases, not taken by me, but by an expert, Prof. Saki Pretorius and his colleagues, and make this available to people. And I think that's really what it is. It's about having a legacy. And my legacy, or the group that I supervise's legacy, is built on the foundation of Professor Neil McLaren. Now, he was my master's and PhD supervisor, and it's already been rooted in the work that I do is rooted in his passion for the field, for asking, so what, and why. And a lot of this connects to the work that I'm currently doing. And so I've often asked myself, why am I investing my time in this? What implications does the research have? Prof. McLaren would often quote Norman Borlaug, your research must be good, but it must be good for something. So his work didn't just produce papers, it built a network of research, training, and collaboration. That still shapes my field of pathology today. And the power of a legacy is not a single achievement, but this relationships and the networks of shared values and practical contributions. So this kind of matters to each of us, because legacies are built through the choices we make and how we prioritize, who to partner with, and how we measure our success. So different communities have different needs, and Prof. McLaren was extremely passionate about sorghum. And for those of you that know, sorghum is kind of considered a Cinderella crop in South Africa, and he really wanted to do something good with it. And so going forward, once I was appointed at the University of the Free State in my current role, decided to take on sorghum as a challenge. And it wasn't really me on my own. We had a group of researchers. And so our sorghum research is really built on the shoulders of giants. So what does this legacy look like? Well, it puts people first. People are the reason why we do projects, and projects succeed when the right people work together with trust and clarity. And this really means that we need to also include voices from the communities which we serve. So our example of sorghum disease surveillance isn't just about, collecting samples. It's about building trust with the farmers so that they can share what's happening in their fields, and we can work together to find solutions. So it's really about co-creating. So these are the experts that are working on the sorghum diseases and the different elements of it. So our group decided to take on an enormous task of launching a national disease survey for sorghum diseases in South Africa. And getting people involved, farmers involved in the beginning was challenging, because we first had to show them why this was important and why we needed their contribution towards this really big project. And it meant that we needed to build trust and show what value we had beyond just, oh, we want to come and do research and we'll do a publication. It really was to show them why we want to contribute to the sorghum industry. And this is where linking up with experts became really important, because I am a field pathologist. I love statistics and I love disease management, but I don't know enough about molecular work or genetics. And this means that we need to reach out to people that are experts. And also find people that are asking different questions and how your questions can work in parallel to one another to strengthen overall different aspects of crop production, for example, and plant health. And this is an excellent example of how the ICGB or Lara's research and our research has been so good to be paralleled. One of us works on above ground problems and the other on below ground problems, exploring what we can do to mitigate losses and look at potential new crop protection. So sometimes when we ask questions, it looks different than we initially expected, and it's really important to be open for that. And on that note, about thinking a little differently, is reading really is important. Thabiso and I, the PhD candidate working on or responsible for the disease surveillance program, we did some reading and we found that, well, we would like to take a different approach to doing large-scale pathogen diagnostics. Yes, we may not be working in soybean, but we wanted to see if we could apply next-generation sequencing for our surveys within the sorghum context. So we decided to actually contact the author, the corresponding author, and we just sent out an email to ask, hi, we loved what you're doing. We would love to learn from you. Are you willing to partner with us? And Professor Brian Cassone from Brandon University emailed us a friendly, hi, nice to meet you back. And I think this is a really important lesson, because sometimes we really, again, just need to put ourselves out there and make ourselves vulnerable enough to find the right person to work with and see whether they're willing. And this is where Thabiso has taken the step up and learned, to write grants over the years. And he applied for grants with Matix and the NRF, and both were successful. So learning the skill of reading and asking the right questions and posing them to the right people has not only paid off for me, but it's paid off for our group, because we can all learn from one another. And so what I would like to talk about is carrying this legacy forward. It really means identifying a shared problem, bringing the right mix of people together, and ensuring everyone benefits from the outcome. My own passion for Sclerotinia began with simple cultivar evaluations, but we could then fit this into a broader context, and we could even start doing oilseed disease surveillance. So this really is a team effort. It means knowing different people from different aspects of our industry, whether it is the chemical companies or the seed industry. It's about knowing who in the public space we can connect with, like at the Agricultural Research Council, or, for example, in the Western Cape, leaning on their expertise with sclerotinia and canola. So all of this is really possible, but not on your own. It is something I've learned really is a team effort, that you shouldn't mind getting your hands dirty, but you don't have to do it alone. And as I wrap up my presentation, I want to ask you 3 questions. So in your research, teaching, or daily decisions, where are you serving, and how does it influence what you do? What bigger impact do you want to have beyond the data? And research is really done alone. Who are you working with, and how can you bring the right people to the table? So to answer the question from Thomas Kempis, I leave you with why do I trouble myself with theories about genera and species? It's a reminder to keep perspective, to remember that the work we do exists in a much larger picture. My own research isn't going to solve global food security or crop protection on its own. That's okay. I haven't figured it all out, but what I want to do is contribute one piece of the puzzle alongside hundreds of others. Contribute to how farmers, policymakers, breeders, and industry work together. So the naming and classifying and understanding of pathogens is truly a matter of knowledge that can connect us to protect crops, sustain communities. And this interconnectedness is really what gets me excited. So our knowledge should serve people and purpose, and not just a theory. Growth as a person matters most when it shapes how we work, live, and contribute together. So that's me in a nutshell. I'd like to thank you guys for listening, and I'll take any questions.